Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. For the purpose of the recording, my name is Lucy Beard, Scrutiny Officer. The Chair is unfortunately unable to attend the meeting today, so in accordance with the Council's constitution, I'll ask the committee for nominations to appoint a chair. I've been advised that any member of the committee can be nominated as chair for a one-off meeting. If there is more than one nomination, it will go to a vote and all the members of the committee present will have a vote. Please could I therefore ask for nominations from the committee for a chair for today's meeting? Councillor Graham Walter, please.
Thank you, Lucy. Can I nominate Councillor Colin Davis?
Thank you. Can I have a seconder, please?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Are there any further nominations, please? Thank you. So if everyone's happy for Councillor Colin Davis to take the chair, we'll commence the meeting once Councillor Colin Davis is ready.
Thanks, Lucy. Can everybody hear me okay? Because a yes.
Yes, Chair.
Thanks. Okay. Welcome all. So welcome to this Subject Overview and Scrutiny Committee 3 meeting, which has been convened as a hybrid meeting. The meeting has been recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed subsequently. Everyone participating in the meeting will be accessing it either from the Council Chamber, Civic Offices, Angel Street, Bridgend, or from remote locations. Should I as Chair experience any technical difficulties during the meeting, someone else will step in and take over temporarily as Chair in my absence. Please can everyone ensure that mobile phones are switched off or put on silent mode. Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda, and I'll ask officers to present a summary of the key points. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Officers and members are reminded to refer to the page number contained in the public version of the agenda report back. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting, and those speaking may switch their cameras on at that point. But I would ask that, with the exception of myself as chairperson, and all other times, you keep your cameras and microphones switched off, as this will help to minimise any background noise and interference. However, as a trail measure, I would invite members and officers to leave their cameras on for the duration of the meeting in the chamber. Whether attending in the chamber or remotely, if any members or officers wish to raise a point or question, they should press the hands up icon on the screen at the top right hand side of the Microsoft Teams window, and I'll come to you in the order I receive requests. If you're in the chamber, please switch on the microphone on your desk and speak directly into the mic to allow those who are remote to hear you clearly. Please lower your hand once you have finished speaking. The instant messaging chat button has been disabled for this meeting. Please do not use your microphone until I invite you to do so. Officers from Scrutiny will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout this duration, and where necessary, will mute those not being used. I will ask officers to introduce themselves when I invite them to speak during the course of the meeting. They too should ensure microphones and cameras are switched off when not in use. I will now proceed to the agenda. Okay. First item is apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. So we've received apologies for absence from Councillor Paul Davis and Councillor Melanie Evans.
No, that's thank you. Any declarations of interest? Bear with me.
We have got some hands up.
Okay, got two hands. I've got Councillor Bledsoe first, then Councillor Nora Clark. Councillor Bledsoe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In relation to apologies, I'm currently travelling back from a civic event on behalf of the Gentown Council. Elected on Stuttgart Railway Station, trying to access the meeting the best I can. I'm reliant on batteries and coverage, so if I drop off, I do apologise, but I'll be in the meeting for as long as I can.
Yeah, fair enough. Thanks, Stephen. Councillor Nora Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies, I will have to leave this meeting at 5 o'clock as I have another appointment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ian Williams. Councillor Ian Williams.
Just to declare interest with anything that relates to Bridgend Town Council as a Bridgend Town councillor, and any thing that relates to Oldcastle Primary, and Binte Comprehensive if we discuss education, as I am a governor of both schools. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, update on the community director's position and challenges with invitees. I think to start off, I think it's worthwhile looking at why the meeting was called. So go back to the meeting on the 19th of June, and it came out of that meeting. And just to clarify some of the wording around why we asked for today's meeting. So members welcomed their position within the committee to challenge and scrutinise correctly. However, we were unified in feeling that recently had not had the scope, that's this committee, had the scope and opportunities to consistently do so. Members expressed severe concerns on the need for greater understanding of the structure, resources and pressures within the Communities Directorate to better understand the position as to any potential issues and to seek reassurances or seek assurances that the Directorate has the resources to deliver what is required. So that was the reason for it. And then Lucy very kindly passed around something for the pre-meet. And what we agreed in the pre-meet, if I'm wrong, Lucy, is that we would go over the pre-meeting summary before inviting questions.
Thank you, Chair. So I think if we could ask ask for a brief outline of the report first, if that's okay, and then we can open it up to members then for questions.
Yeah, my apologies. You are right. We did agree we do it in that order. So, so I'm not in the chamber, obviously. So, would it be right to ask Janine to start us off?
It's me, Chair, Mark Shepherd, Chief Executive.
Oh, okay, Mark, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I've been asked to be brief, so I don't intend going through the report per se, but we provided you a report with a lot of detailed information in, which hopefully provides useful background and context. You've given the purpose for the meeting. I think what the report then sets out are many of the challenges that the Directorate, indeed the Council, faces, some of which are well rehearsed. I won't go into the detail again, but obviously the cumulative impact of savings over many, many years, which are very significant. The current vacancies across the Directorate, which obviously affects capacity and resilience, and also dilutes the level of service provision and performance in parts of the Directorate. I think it's also worth noting, however, there's still very good performance and very good practice in parts of the Directorate. For example, based on evidence and not just on anecdote, within waste and recycling, strategic planning and regeneration. But we also recognise there are pockets of areas of performance that we'd like to improve, including some of the responsiveness issues that were raised with me when I met with the scrutiny chairs. I think the conclusion I would draw from all of the information that's been presented to you is that obviously the authority is in a very difficult time at the moment, certainly financially, and I know there was a budget briefing to members Caris gave on Friday. Ultimately, this comes down to choices and priorities. It comes down to managing expectations, because if there is a desire from members that we wish certain elements of the Directorate performance to improve, that may well be possible with investment, but of course the more difficult bit is, well, what are we not going to do to make that investment? So I think it's a valid debate today. It's a timely one, but the reality is, as things stand, without any additional investment and in the current circumstances and projections, I think Janine and I feel that we do need to move towards a different operating model, one that probably means that we have to focus on fewer things and do those things well, and potentially find different ways of doing other things, whether that's working with partners, whether that's facilitating and enabling more effectively. But it's important that if we continue to try and do everything that we've done historically, then I think unfortunately some of those frustrations will remain, because we're spreading ourselves incredibly thinly, and we're unable to perhaps meet the expectations of both members and the public in the way that is desired, and incidentally is desired by us as well. There's nothing I'd like better than an injection of £15 million that we could do everything better, but we are facing some very, very difficult challenges. So I said I'd keep it brief. I will leave it at that, but obviously we have myself, Janine, all of Cabinet and Caris here to answer any questions that the committee may have, Chair. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. So would it be now a good idea then to move to, as I said, to look at the pre-meet framework that we looked at before we move on to questions? And I'm just juggling between screens, so bear with me. Steve, Councillor Bethel, I could see you had your hand up before Mark Shepherd started talking. So Steve, do you want to come in now?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if possible, I'd like to just read a part of our constitution, and there's a reason why I want to read this.
Stephen, there's really bad background noise for you. Is there any way you could move to another part of the station?
Of course, I seem to be sat underneath the tannoy, so I do apologise to everybody who's hearing station announcements in German. I just want to read a part of our constitution because I believe it's a very important scene setter for today, and it comes under 7.1.1 and 1.2 of our constitution, and it reads: the council is required by law to discharge certain overview and scrutiny functions. These functions are an essential component of local democracy. Overview and scrutiny committees should be powerful committees that can contribute to the development of council policies and also hold the Cabinet to account for its decisions. Another key part of the overview and scrutiny role is to review existing policies, consider proposals for new policies, and suggest new policies. And 7.1.2 reads: overview and scrutiny should be carried out in a constructive way, and it should aim to contribute to the delivery of efficient and effective services that meet the needs and aspirations of local inhabitants. Overview and scrutiny committees should not shy away from the need to challenge and question decisions that make constructive criticism. And I hope that as we move forward in this meeting, that we can remember that, because this is what we are charged to do with this committee. And it's the reason why I was very insistent on being part of calling this meeting, because we cannot continue as we are. We've had details in the past from officers about the number of questions that are not being replied back to us, and we can all list them, and it would take a long time to do so. But I believe that we need to be in a position where, when we as a unified committee working constructively get timely answers back to our staff that serve us and allow us to do this constructive criticism that is required and mandated by law. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, thanks, Stephen. I don't think there's any doubt, really, isn't it? That's why we're here today. Yeah. So, so point taken. Councillor Graham Walter.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to Janine for putting the report together, which I found frank and helpful, and sets out, amongst other things, we shouldn't forget, quite an impressive list of achievements in recent years. I would suggest that the report be made available to all members. Taking the pre-meeting summary sheet that we worked with and going down in order there, the first item on the top of that sheet was about the vacancy level. So I've got three short observations or questions to mark. The first one would be that we seem to have 61 vacancies out of a complement of 568, which is about 11% of the directorate. So my first question would be, how does that compare to the all authority rate, vacancy rate? The second one would be, is there any benchmarking with neighbouring local authorities? Is it an issue, as we know, for example, in social services, that affects every local authority in Wales and the UK, or is it relatively unique to ourselves? I'll stop there, and then, if I may, Chair, come back with the final part of my question. Thank you.
That's good. That's good. Thanks, Greg. I think we could stick to, because I know Councillor Ian Williams has got a couple of questions relating to this section as well. So, yeah, so I'm handing over to Mark, is it?
Yes.
Janine?
Yes, good afternoon, Chair. I think as possibly it might be better if I answer this as I put the report together. Councillor Walter, what you will find is that vacancy rate of 61 is from that professional service layer in communities, it's not from the 500. So actually the percentage is much higher, I'm afraid. So out of the 160 technical services posts we have that vacancy rate from them. So we have about a 40% vacancy in my professional services layer. I have other vacancies in other layers, but for the sake of this scrutiny committee, the one that causes me the most difficulty is not having those professional services. Now, what I would say is this is not unique to Bridgend. I was in a conference not long ago about the Corporate Joint Committee, speaking to contemporaries from other local authorities, and they're having the same situation as us. Very difficult to recruit quantity surveyors or surveyors of any ilk, engineers, transport planners. There's a difficulty across the board, and I think a lot of that, unfortunately, is to do with the ever-expanding salary gap between the public and the private sector. So there is a real difficulty there. So we've been looking at innovative ways of moving some of our vacancies forward. For instance, where we require a chartership, for instance, we've been saying we will take a surveyor who has a lot of experience and then take them through their chartership as part of BCBC. Now, we can't do that on all posts, of course, because some posts need to be professionally qualified, but we are working with HR, looking at things more innovatively to see if we can move things forward. Now, the second part of the question, I believe, or the second question was about benchmarking. And yes, we try to do that all the time. The difficulty we've got as compared to colleagues in social services is in social services, an awful lot of job descriptions are exactly the same. If you're a social worker, your job and the role you carry out is very similar. Local authorities such as Neath Talbot or the Vale of Glamorgan, the way they have set up their services is very different to our own. So it's very difficult to benchmark. For instance, my head of parks is also head of parks and bereavement together, because as part of the budget savings we've made over the years, we've merged posts. So it's incredibly difficult for us to benchmark effectively. It is something we want to do and something we're trying to do. So we know that we can benchmark vacancies in things like engineers, structural engineers. We can benchmark those, but it does get a little bit more difficult where we've merged posts. So I hope that answered some of your questions. So the vacancy level that concerns us most is in that professional level. Understood. It is currently 61. We're trying to recruit, but it does, I'm afraid, account for about 40% of my professional level there.
Oh, thank you, Janine. And Chair, just the second part, and then I'll make way for somebody else, would be around the two posts that have been vacant for 2 years and 3 years, respectively. Obviously, that's very difficult for the department. That's completely understood. But I wonder if we're being a critical friend, if and I'm sure the answer is yes, if those posts have been reevaluated to understand if they're needed, or maybe they're being backfilled by people on secondment or acting up. I don't know. I'd be interested to find out a little bit more about those two, and then whether some of these senior posts, professional posts, whether there's an opportunity to take the shared regulatory services model and perhaps share or try to share some of those professionally qualified posts with a neighbouring authority, for example. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Graham, and I agree with that. That when you've got the stage, it's quite stark reading the report, and that's probably why a lot of people are asking questions about that 2.10. The list there, Janine, is quite shocking, really, in terms of the seniority and the responsibility, and those people missing from the workforce, gen workforce, and also the length of time. But Councillor Walker's made a really good point there in terms of the SRS model. And it may overcome some of the issues, or we recognise the fact that because the differentiation between private and local government, that's almost impossible to overcome. I'd be interested on that point of how much this figures in the workforce development plan and how much input you've had into that as a directorate.
Yeah, if I may, I'll take you to those two posts. So the two posts we've had most difficulty with are building control team leader and structural engineers. The building control team lead, if I just unpick that one, the issue that we've got now is building control can be undertaken privately by private companies, or you can come through to the council. And what that has done is opened up the marketplace. Lots of people who used to be building control managers and leaders and work in local government no longer do, I'm afraid. They're either private practice or they work for themselves. So that really has opened that up. Now, we have been speaking to colleagues in neighbouring authorities to see whether there's any mileage, dare I say, in bringing together a shared responsibility. And that's something we'll definitely have to explore as part of this new target operating model, because try as we might, we've tried numerous occasions and we cannot get someone with the right level of experience into that role. The same with the structural engineer. That is less easy to resolve. Because you do need a structural engineer in the authority as part of our statutory duty. We must retain one. So what we have done is we've got somebody, since that post has been vacant, we've been backfilling it with an agency. So we do have a structural engineer. But one thing that we use and we're more heavily reliant on as the years go by is our Red Start joint venture. So RCT, Merthyr and us at BCBC have a joint venture for these specialist services. Now, the beauty about it being our company is that we have all of these specialist services together in one place, and the day rate is much, much lower than it would be if we had to buy it in on the open market, substantially lower. So what we have been doing is we've been commissioning a lot of work via our Red Start colleagues, and that really has been the only thing that's assisted us here. We do have agency staff occasionally, but using Red Start, to be fair, for the communities directorate has been a lifesaver in terms of our situation. So I think going forward, it needs to be a multitude of things. It needs to be working closely with our HR colleagues and our HR lead advisor. We need to look at more innovative ways of recruiting. It is looking at working with other local authorities more closely, like the SRS requirement, and of course using that joint venture in the right way. It's been set up to assist with these engineering and these roles, so we need to use that in the way that's possible, because I think going forward, as set out in that report, some posts are almost impossible to fill. Unfortunately, because the gap between salary levels in local authority and private sector is way too wide now for us to be able to fill. So we need to look at other ways of delivering. And that's what I assure you, that's what we'll continue to do. So I hope that's answered some of the questions.
Thanks, Janine. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks. Okay, so got three hands up now, but I just want to clarify those three councillors. Are you asking questions about, as we agreed, the first issue, which is level of vacancies? If you are, keep your hand up. If not, can you put it down, please? And we'll come to you at a later time. So Councillor Martin Williams, then I guess your question is around the level of vacancies.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I was quite pleased to hear Janine's comment there about bringing in effectively graduate engineers and trying to train them to charter status. Because when I first read the paper, I was concerned there was some sort of dumbing down there, and we were sort of reassessing what the role should be, and we were losing any aspiration to have that professional qualification or professional cadre of staff. Obviously, we have to grow our own in that sense, and that's not unlike what we're trying to achieve in social services. Do we, in your view, have sufficient senior qualified people, not just in engineering, but in planning as well, to act as mentors and training, supervising engineers and the like? Or do we have to lean into our joint ventures, or perhaps look elsewhere within neighbouring authorities to provide that mentoring?
Janine again.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Truthfully, probably not currently. That's the difficulty, of course, because we have quite a few, the vacancies are in that senior level, they're in that experienced level, the professional services level, so it is getting more and more difficult. Absolutely, we're so committed to grow your own. We're committed to promoting from within, That's something we're currently undertaking a restructure of our planning department, and we have filled quite a lot of the senior posts with staff already working for us who are excellent, very experienced, and deserve those better posts. We do recruit internally wherever we can. However, I think currently I would like to replace some more of the people in my structure. In particular, some of the areas that I have real issues are in corporate landlord, where I have Justin Kingdom has 21 vacancies, a lot of them in significant levels. Very, very difficult. And I also have my engineering team. It's a team of 22 posts. I've got 14 vacancies for highway engineers, structural engineers, etc. Now, those are the two areas where we're really concentrating our efforts and working with human resources. Now, both of those group leaders and the team leaders within them want to grow their own, want to fill the structure, want to achieve, and they are actually, believe it or not, even with the resource we've had some fantastic projects that have come forward from the team. When I was putting that report together, I knew we were in a difficult situation. And when I saw, I think all of my DMT was shocked when we put those vacancies together. Yeah. Everybody individually knew they had vacancies, but when you put the full picture together, and I have to say I couldn't be prouder than how they are delivering, despite all of this, both revenue and numbers of posts. However, it isn't sustainable. It isn't sustainable. We do now need to look at how we move forward. So we will try now working with HR to try and fill those posts. We will try and look at other ways of working, including sharing responsibilities with other LAs, using Red Start more. But we have to look at what the permanent structure will be like going forward. And if we have tried to recruit for 3 years and we are not recruiting, such as the building control team leader, I think we need to come to the conclusion we will not fill that post. And how do we do that role differently? Because again, we have to use our efforts wisely, don't we, and effectively. Work smarter, not harder. So that's going to be the focus going forward. But I'm afraid I would love to say that I've got lots of people in the higher grade post to bring people on, but I'm afraid I couldn't confidently tell you that this morning, or this afternoon rather. It's been a long day.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Shane. Sorry for extending your day. Leader.
Thank you, Chair. And I wanted to reflect on the success that there has been. So we've heard about the difficulties in terms of recruiting a building control manager. It's only a small team, but I know that 2 of the officers there were apprentices, have been successfully grown into building control officers, professional, experienced officers now working very hard and successfully. And on the joint venture engineering, design and consultancy service that we have jointly with the neighbouring local authorities of RCT and Merthyr, that's a long-standing partnership and relationship. And we made the decision at Cabinet last week that we would re-procure that. And for those colleagues that weren't able to join the Cabinet meeting, you would have heard me talk about the need for that service to look at how it can be part of our grow our own strategy. So how can that joint venture develop new talent, provide a route, potentially a route from the joint service directly to this authority, or vice versa. But it's about growing the overall size of the pool of specialist officers, but also ensuring that there's different routes available, because we're not the biggest of local authorities. And as I believe Councillor Williams indicated, we are in a difficult position where, because we're short of experienced professionals, we're not able to provide as many apprenticeships and graduate roles as we would want, because obviously they require supervision and they require support from professionals that are very, very busy. That said, as the director has described, we're still able to and will continue to try and build that grow our own service, and there are areas where that's worked very well, not least the planning development function, where once again we've seen graduates move through the system, and not least, of course, the group manager for planning and development, who started off as a blue-eyed trainee in the organisation and has now reached the level of group manager. So we've got real clear pathways in lots of professions, but we need to look at how we can build that further. Thank you, Chair.
Leader, Councillor Ian Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, with regard to filling positions that require graduates or applicants to have degrees, if they don't have that qualification, do we then look to see if we can fill positions with people who are suitably qualified through workplace experience? Is that ever considered? Or is it a statute, or do they have to have degree status?
May I, Chair?
Sorry, yes, because I was looking at the report. Actually, you say something about that in the report, don't you? In terms of changing the criteria for posts, removing chartered status as a barrier to recruitment and assistant staff to gain this in post. Yeah. So yeah, go on, Janine.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very valid point, Councillor Williams, you make. Unfortunately, if the post requires a degree, unfortunately, I'm not able to remove that barrier. There's a reason why I ask for a degree level, but so I can't remove degrees. However, what I can do is I can look at the chartership piece, for instance, and whether you have a degree, and then we can help you achieve your chartership. So I can do that. But let me just give you a live example of something that we have done in communities. We wanted to recruit an energy manager, and we were having some real difficulty. We tried 3 or 4 different times to go out to the market, and what we decided to do in the end was to bring in a graduate manager, and then to grow the experience and the professionality of that post. And we've been incredibly successful. So what we had to do was to remove that post as it stood. We had to go back through job evaluation, reevaluate it, make it a graduate and put it back out, and had some real success. Got excellent candidate in now. Now, I can't do that in all areas, but where I can, I will. In order that we can get people with the right experience and into the posts. It is difficult in some areas, particularly in my technical areas. Some of the engineers, they don't necessarily need to be chartered, but they do need a degree in engineering. So I do have some movement. And we are looking at ways, and the energy manager example is a good example, I think, of where we've got someone in. The key now is to treat them well, get good things from them, and retain them, and that's what we're attempting to do now.
Good point. Thank you, Janine.
Yeah. My concern was really about if people don't have a degree or the relevant qualifications. There are so many good people out there with the relevant workplace experience that could fill positions, but that wouldn't apply, no? If the job stipulates that you must have a degree, that's okay.
I think, Councillor Williams, if we do require a degree for a certain level of job, I'm afraid we won't be able to remove that. However, we're always looking at job descriptions and revising them. And if we're not getting success, are we aiming at the right people? Because you're absolutely right. Just because you haven't got a degree doesn't mean you've got lots of experience and we wouldn't want you. So what we'd have to do in those occasions is bring the post back in, remove that essential qualification, and then go back out and say, or sometimes we say degree and or significant experience. So there are things we can do. But I know that my cabinet member, Councillor Good, would like to come in and assist with the question here.
Would that be
go
okay?
On, Rhys. Yeah, go on, Rhys.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. I think it's a really valid point. I think it's the things that I think Janine is trying to raise here is that obviously there are specific roles that just because of professional reasons have to have those qualifications. But certainly, I'm very much a believer that you can have a lot of experience without degrees. Often now, I have a degree in history. I'm not a historian. And they aren't always necessary. And I think wherever possible, we do look at having that flexibility. I know there is some, in my view, some antiquation in the way some of our posts are graded. And I think that is something we should look at to modernise, because it isn't necessarily true of a modern workforce. But I think, wherever possible, certainly within these roles, I know we have done an awful lot to try and make sure that those people with requisite experience, where specific professional qualifications aren't required, are then allowed access to these positions, because it's certainly not something we want to do where we bite off our nose to cut off our nose to spite our face. But I think it's a point very well made, and we do need to keep having a watchful eye on what we are asking for and whether that is the reality of modern qualifications. So I think it's a very good point, Councillor.
Councillor Williams, you happy with that?
Yeah. I think one of the main, I was talking to Councillor Kern in the break, and saying that the gap now is massive between the private sector and the public sector. And one of the main attractions at one time was the package and pensions. Does that still apply? Can we enhance pensions? Or my wife teaches, and she's one of the fortunate ones who's going to finish. Her pension pot is full, but she's finishing on a final salary pension. But I know now that's gone by the board. And where I think we really need to attract people in to fill these positions, because when you look at the figures there, it's quite frightening. It's quite stark, isn't it?
So retention is important as recruitment then. So I think I've got a couple of people's hands here. So to be fair to Councillor Jonathan Pratt, he's been very patient. But if somebody could just come back to Councillor Ian Williams on that issue of retention, please.
So first of all, can I just respond to that number of points there? I think it's an important point around the whole package and the pensions, and we still have a final salary pension package in place for new starters. And you are right, that is still relatively attractive, very attractive compared to private sector. Unfortunately, what we are finding is that particularly lots of people at the start of their career, they're not necessarily thinking, they should be thinking about their pension, but they're not. And perhaps we should do more around that. We don't have much flexibility because, of course, that's part of nationally determined terms and conditions, but it is there, and it certainly should be seen as an asset that can help attract the workforce. The point I wanted to come in on as well, Chair, is just on that requirement for professional qualifications. And I've just confirmed with Janine, and there's been a number of employees within some of our teams who are technically experienced, but perhaps aren't professionals, but are support officers and have done the job. And what we have done and will continue to do is support those individuals to achieve the necessary qualifications. So that's another route that we'll continue to explore, and we have set aside funding for that. So if someone who's a technical support officer comes to us and we recognise their experience and their skills, and they say that they want to study for a qualification, we will support employees in that route. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Okay, just a note of caution, as you can imagine, other local authorities are also looking at these issues. So the sooner we move towards our own plan, the better. Councillor Jonathan Pratt.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and apologies for not being able to make the pre-meeting. I've too many hours, not enough hours in the day and too many things to do, but I'm here at the main meeting. My question over recruitment would be, how well does Bridgend County Borough Council work with our armed forces over resettlement events for personnel leaving the forces, and recognising the skills that the armed forces do present, and and whether, you know, it's certainly transferable skills from there, whether someone's leaving after 22 years service or a number of years. Does BCBC attend these events and basically sell the local government viewpoint, and that it is a sustainable career after their military service. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, good point. To be fair to Janine, it would have been a good idea if we'd had the head of HRU, I think, today, but there you are. Janine, do you want to come back in on this one, or do you think it's a wider topic than just communities?
Chair, I was going to make a contribution because I can actually answer that in some regards.
So in terms of the workforce planning element of it, Jane, you want to come in, do you?
It's not just the workforce planning, it was specifically around our armed forces veterans.
Okay, go on then.
So
take it away.
Both. I'm fortunate for the WLGA. I sit as part of the workforce negotiators for NJC, Solbury, the whole raft of local government committees. What I would say is that this is a wider conversation. We are set national terms and conditions. They are set at UK government level. There is only one representative on various committees. It's either myself or Councillor Anthony Hunt, who's the leader of Torvine. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's right, isn't it, leader? And what I would say is we are very, very clear that until we resolve and sort out all the terms and conditions, it doesn't matter what colour book they are, public services has been decimated over 14 years. And it's not just about council finances. Actually, we need the staff to deliver. The private sector is very definitely in advance of any public sector now. That's what the one contribution I would make around that. And I will continue to put pressure on for all councils in Wales, as will Councillor Hunt. So I think that's important to note. Part of the NJC claim, the Green Book claim this year, is also around terms and conditions. They want a review of it. I'm also aware that it's something that's on the Cabinet agenda, so I'm sure that the Chief Exec might want to make a contribution, because we are aware that it is a problem. Green Book employees are only keeping up with the national living wage, and consequently we've been compressing our grades across local government for many years now, and that was just a way of saving money. We can't afford to do that anymore. The other contribution I'd like to make is HR are very aware of our veterans, so as part of their resettlement, we are being invited, particularly around social services, we are being invited to give a talk on what we actually do. What we find is there are a lot of ex-service personnel that are brilliant in residential services, and they're really competent at managing difficult situations, as you would expect them to be, if I'm really frank. And they've got good boundaries. So yes, that is all something that is on our work agenda, but I just wanted to make that contribution, Chair. Thank you very much. And I am sorry for interrupting you. It's very difficult to chair a meeting when you're virtual.
Okay, thanks, Deb. Okay, so sticking to the framework provided by Scrutiny team, we agreed we'd look at the vacancies. I think we've looked at vacancies. We've not just looked at vacancies in terms of communities. We've looked at it in a wider way, which is really important. Leader, you want to come in? Oh, you've dropped your hand.
It was only to confirm that we work very closely with the armed forces community. We have a guaranteed interview scheme for veterans, and a number of veterans have taken advantage of that, and we've been really pleased with the number of veterans who have been successfully recruited to the organisation, and we can always do more, or we're looking to do more, because there are thousands of veterans we know living in the county borough, and they do have a very strong set of skills from their time in the armed forces. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Bledsoe, you back in on the same topic, yeah, in terms of vacancies?
Yeah, Chair, I was just asking, I've just listened to all of that contribution. Can we, as a committee, keep our remit to communities? Otherwise, we'll be here for hours discussing the wider issues of the council. And whilst ever it is linked, I think the point that we're here to do is to scrutinise this communities directorate.
Yeah, but I don't think you can look at it in isolation. I'm sorry, you know, at the end of the day, this is a workforce planning issue and we're under siege in every department. And that was brought up by comparisons with social services in the report. So I think it was relevant. Okay, thank you. We're going to move on now then to the next element in the framework, which was relevant financial information. Do we have the relevant financial information in the report? And can I invite any questions for that, please? Councillor Graham Walter.
I think Councillor Williams was before me. Councillor Ian Williams.
He just dipped in before. Did he? Okay, Councillor Ian Williams.
Quick on the draw. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd be interested to get some understanding of the level of funding that we're putting into net carbon zero 2030 in light of recent announcements by Westminster government on easing back to ease the burden on the public. I was just wondering if it's possible to identify what sort of funding has been allocated towards, can I call it NCZ? We obviously have a department. What is the cost and overhead of that department? I really would appreciate if you could get some figures so we could see, or the public could see, what we are spending on this initiative. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, is that a question you want directed at anybody in particular? Because again, it is a much wider topic than just looking at Project Net Zero as it relates to communities. Mark, you're going to come in and address this issue?
I will try and help if I may, and I think probably going to say some of what you just said. I think the difficulty is, Councillor Williams, there are certainly some projects that very directly you could say are net zero projects. I think the problem is there are many others where we would say there's an impact on it, which perhaps also have another purpose. So, for example, active travel, you would argue is part of net zero, but of course the expenditure on it is regarded more as a highways and transport scheme. That's one of the reasons why within the report template now we try and identify the net zero impact from everything we do. But I do think it's quite difficult to just segregate certain things and say that's our spend on net zero, though clearly we'll understand there are certain projects where we could probably more readily make that direct link. But that probably isn't that helpful, but I do think it's quite difficult in the way the Chair said to entirely separate it in that way.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, Councillor Williams, you want to come back?
Yeah, please, if I could. We obviously have a climate change department. What is the cost of that overhead to this authority?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm sure we can give you that figure. There's a small number of officers in a team who work on energy. 3 officers. Yeah, we can give you that figure. Thank you.
Well, we don't just have a climate change department, we have a climate change emergency. Let me remind you of that. So in terms of the ULA's debate last week, at the same time, remember, you saw pictures on the TV of holidaymakers running for their lives from the various wildfires in Greece. So it is a very real climate emergency going on. And any kind of, and it's not a political issue, any kind of antidote to that crisis is welcome, I think. Councillor Graham Walter.
Thanks, Chair. Just bear with me whilst I get this question structured properly. And I certainly don't want this to be every question from me, certainly won't be going to Janine. Hopefully the report sets out the Directorate's budget of £31 million and that it represents 9% of the authority's budget. I suppose my question is to either Mark or to the leader, which is, have we done any benchmarking in terms of the budget per head of population in this authority for communities versus those of others authorities in South Wales of a similar size? I'm very keen to try and find ways of helping, not just to understand the problems better, but to try and find out where we sit, whether our problems are unique, and whether when we find out some of those answers, it might give some political impetus to to funding better this particular directorate if and when we can. So benchmarking the budget per head of population and benchmarking also 9% of our total spend to communities. How does that compare? Thanks very much, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Walter. And I've got Mark and then the leader. So Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Walter. Again, I can give you part of the answer. We've commissioned a piece of work through the WLGA, which we intend sharing at the next meeting of BREP. That will provide part of what you're looking for. It'll provide benchmarking information across selected authorities in Wales, across certain services. I think it's difficult to compare communities against communities, because you'll understand there's different services within different departments across council. So you almost have to do it on a service by service basis. You know, the headlines from that will be a mixed picture. There will be some services where we spend below the median. There are probably one or two that we spend above. But overall, you know, that I think what that report will do is give us a clue and help shape and inform perhaps where we need to do further work, and then look at that in the way you describe to help inform certain budget discussions moving forward. So yes is the answer. We're trying to benchmark as best we can, and I think that report, which I say will go to next BREP, will begin to help do that for you and other members as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Leader.
I think Mark has covered it, but just to emphasise that no two local authorities are the same in Wales in terms of their structure. So every local authority will have slightly different structures. In some places across Wales, for example, housing will sit with regeneration. They may have separate departments for highways and waste. So we've got to make sure that we're making fair and proper comparisons, and that's where this work that's been undertaken by the WLJ will be helpful to us. I just want to go back to Councillor Williams's point around the climate change team, just as a point of information, because I think it is an important point of information. The climate change team isn't only responsible for leading on our efforts to respond to the climate emergency, but also the nature emergency we have. So it undertakes for us our statutory duties around ecology. So it includes our ecologist, but also the work we're doing around advancing biodiversity, for example, through the Cwmtaf Nature Network and the work we're doing there. And I was out on site last week at Ogmore Washeries, where we're doing very important work actually about supporting threatened local and nationally important species of bees and invertebrate. Thanks, Chair.
So, Chair, thank you. And I just really wanted to stress this is about trying to find ways that we can understand how the authority is comparing to others, to see whether, you know, the department or the directorate is critically underfunded, moderately underfunded, about average. You know, it's about trying to understand where we are to help officers and the director in planning going forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for that reminder. And also in terms of the finances as well, I just want to raise one issue around the stark reality of the cuts since 2014 and also 2010. Some of those cuts as a percentage were absolutely massive. I don't know whether I can invite one of the officers to talk a little bit about the level of the cuts you've experienced since 2010 and 2014. Would be best placed to do that.
I can come in there, Chair, if you'd like.
Thank you, Caris.
I think the report does outline for you the level of reductions that the community services had to make over that period. And I don't underplay those at all. So I think Janine has detailed in the report, nearly £12 million savings has been made since 2014-15.
Yeah.
I suppose you'd expect me to say this, wouldn't you? But we have to put that in the context of the overall budget.
Yeah.
So in the same period, the budget reductions for the authority as a whole have been just under £57 million. And in fact, they're £70 million if you go back to 2010 when we started with austerity. Yeah. So considerable cuts across all services. I think Janine has put in the report that There has been policy decisions in the past to support social care and education, and you'll see that with the profile of the savings that have been made. But savings have been made across all services in that period, with of the 56 million that's been made since 2014-15, just under 12, or just under 12 million of that has been from the community services budget.
Thank you, Carys. Next question again, Councillor Ian Williams.
Yeah, sorry to hog the line right here, Chair. Page 5, 2.5, £692,000 from the revenue budget given to the Cardiff Capital Region deal.
Did you say 2.5, you said, is it?
Yeah, 2.5 on page 5.
Yeah.
Surely that £692,000 would have a massive impact coming out of the revenue budget on the services that we are trying to provide. Because we're trying to understand here what we can do to try and alleviate or mitigate the pressures that we're under. And even this year, we are given £120,000 from the revenue budget to the Cardiff Capital Region deal when we haven't got a pot to throw a penny in. I find it hard to understand and comprehend how I get my head around that. Also, this year's budget was balanced and robust, and we've come under certain pressures, but those pressures were ongoing prior to this year, 23-24, and were ongoing through 22-23. Yet in 22-23, this authority gave a zero council tax increase budget. How did that happen?
Is that your question, or is it wider
what sort of pressures were put on politically to staff to come up with a zero council tax increase budget for 22-23? And are the payments going to the Cardiff Capital Region deal from the revenue budget impacting negatively on our ability to provide services?
You've asked a number of questions there. Can you just clarify? Can you just 2 questions? Yeah. Can you just repeat them for the officers to be aware of what exactly you're asking?
22-23, we came up with a zero council tax increase budget when there were financial pressures ongoing through 22-23. What pressures were put on staff to politically to come up with a zero council tax increase for that election year? And are the payments going out to the Cardiff Capital Region deal, 692,000 highlighted page in 2.5 in 27-2018? Are we paying £120,000 to it again this year? This has got to be impacting our ability to provide services.
Okay, so there's 2 questions there. One is a political thing, so I think I'll ask the leader to reply to that one. And then in terms of the speculate to accumulate issue regarding our contribution to the Cardiff City deal, I'll ask Cardiff to deal with that. So leader, if you could answer the first bit, please, about 22-23 and a 0% increase in council tax.
Well, I'm sure the statutory 151 officer can confirm that no pressure at all was placed on officers. That wouldn't be appropriate to do so. And as I recall at the time, there was support across the political chamber for that council tax freeze. And of course, we would every year like to freeze the council tax. At the time, given that we had a far better than expected settlement from Welsh Government, we were able to do so because we recognise, and this is the balancing act, isn't it? Every year we look at what we want to do to protect services and to minimise the number of cuts, and we have to balance that against the potential impact on our residents of any council tax increases. And that was a decision taken at the time. Obviously, since then, the pressures have grown significantly across the board. And the trade-off for us is, if we're not part of the Cardiff Capital Region, we're not going to have the rollout, for example, of the electric vehicle charging points we're currently seeing across the county borough. We won't have the investment that we will be seeing in the Metro Hub in Porthcawl, and we won't have had...
Can I have a point of order there, please, Chair? The Metro is not Cardiff Capital Region deal money. I would like... It's separate. Then it's...
I don't know, so I'd have to ask somebody to comment on that.
The Metro Plus would not be happening in Porthcawl without Cardiff Capital Region. All the Metro Plus projects are Cardiff Capital Region projects.
£480 million is the Cardiff Capital Region deal.
Councillor Williams, can I let the leader finish?
120 million, sorry.
Can I let him finish saying what he was saying, and then you can come back at him? Okay.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Davis. So I think Councillor Williams might be referring to the Metro scheme, which is the main phase of the Metro programme, and in actual fact, the whole Metro programme is using Cardiff Capital Region funding as match funding, but the Metro Plus is specifically using additional funding from Cardiff Capital Region for Metro Plus projects like Porthcawl. And just to finish my point, I was about to talk about Iwenny Road site in my stake, and there will be other sites. So if we don't want to progress those projects, we can, of course, members may say that we should leave the Cardiff Capital Region. We wouldn't be progressing those projects. So it's not, unless we wouldn't want to progress, for example, the Iwenny Road site in my stake. And if we did, then we'd have to find our own money to fund that. And that's a £3.5 million project. And that would be the choice for members. And also, I would make the point that it is now a legal requirement that we have a corporate joint committee for South East Wales. That is now a matter of Welsh law, and of course we are in the process of transitioning from the Cardiff Capital Region to a joint committee. So whether or not there was a city deal, we would still need to be part of a joint committee for South East Wales. That is a matter of law now. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, hold on, Councillor Williams. You asked another question, so let the 151 on. Councillor Williams, please. Yeah, I'm trying to manage the meeting remotely. It's not easy. Please bear with me. So you asked another question. Let the 151 officer answer that question, and then if you want to raise another issue, you can do. Okay, thanks. So the second question.
So I think the question I'm answering now is the issue of our payments to the Cardiff Capital Region. The leader has already outlined that actually we are drawing down considerable funding from the CCR arrangement, both this year and in coming years, for some major developments that are happening in our area. The revenue contributions that we make to CCR, maybe I could just clarify what they are. You've mentioned the 120,000. That goes towards running the CCR office. It's our contribution, and all of the other authorities within the region pay that as well. We also are required to contribute some capital monies as well. And Bridgend has made the decision that we're funding that via an earmarked reserve, and in order to build up that reserve, there was a policy decision to put that money out of the revenue account over a period of time. Now, actually, our commitment and will be fully funded once we make the payment for the 24-25 revenue year. Therefore, and that has meant we've not had to borrow, and we've not got a long-term debt in relation to the capital monies that we've put into the CCR. So as a result, actually the revenue account can be adjusted after 24-25, where we will no longer be required to boost that EMR by just under 600,000 a year. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Carys. Can I just come back to the leader?
Hold on a sec, Councillor Williams. We're only a small, short way through. I've got Councillor Stephen Bledsoe probably waiting patiently on some train station in Germany. So if you don't mind, you have had a number of questions. If you don't mind, you've had a number of questions. I'll come back to you later when we move on to another part of the framework. But I've got Councillor Williams, please. Got Councillor Bledsoe waiting to speak, to ask a question, so I'll move to Councillor Bledsoe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This political question directed at the leader of the cabinet rather than an officer. Councillor Williams has raised that the 22-23, but
you cut out, I'm afraid. You cutting out.
So I'll speak a bit closer. I can see that you're cupping your ear, so I'll move closer to the phone. I do apologise, Mr. Chair. Councillor pointed out. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, keep going. Go on.
Am I coming through, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, you are.
Do you want to go to somebody else? I'll come back in later.
Okay, so Councillor Jonathan Pratt.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just if we're going to discuss the Cardiff City regional deal, it is a complicated process. I mean, at the moment we are seeing more money being spent in Cardiff than sort of anywhere else in Southeast Wales. But we can't operate along political boundaries which manufactured in a human context. We do have to look beyond our borders at BCBC for the well-being of our community, essentially, whether that's jobs, leisure, basically life as we speak. It is a complicated process, but I assume that the councillors and officers who sit on CCRD argue to the fullest extent for Bridgend County Borough Council's fair share of the monies provided across the CCRD. I suppose we'll wait to see whether we do get a fair amount of money. But if we do leave the CCRD, and I'm conscious that we are moving out of the what we're supposed to be discussing here, I suppose. But we cannot afford to isolate ourselves within the boundaries of Bridgend County Borough Council, because there is a real fear there that we watch the rest of Wales thrive and BCBC falls behind. So I think that though contentious, as I'm sure it always will be, CCRD, that is certainly the argument for me myself, that for us to remain within the regional deal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pratt. Councillor Williams, if this is going to be on the CCRD again, can I just remind you that you have had quite a lot to say about it within the time frame, and we do have to move on. So I will allow it, but please bear that in mind. Yeah, go on.
The leader just said that we were getting £4 million for the metro in Porthcawl, £3.5 million for the Iweni Road deal, which is £7.5 million, when our contribution to the Cardiff Capital deal was £11.3 million. So I'm still struggling, because there was a multiplier, which was also a 3-time multiplier. So our 11.3 should really come out to 45.2 if it was equated and it was equitable and fair. But it doesn't appear to be that way. So we've paid 11.3 to get 7.5.
If you'd like to respond, it's a 20-year project.
Yeah.
5 years in. So of course we haven't had all the return we were expecting, because we've got another 15 years left of the project. And of course, the investment is up front and a lot of the return is over the long term in infrastructure projects. And there will be a lot more outcome and investment that we will see across the county borough. But it is a long-term commitment. That's why this council made that long-term commitment to the city deal. Thank you, Chair.
Will we be contributed more?
Councillor Williams, please, we have discussed this in great depth. So I have said there is a context, this discussion about our Communities Directorate, but I think you can only go so far with that. Yeah, so if we can move on now, Councillor Bledsoe looks like he wants to come back in with a question. So Councillor Bledsoe.
Thank you, Councillor Davis, and sorry for making your job more difficult. I was on the underground, but we're back above ground now, so I hope you can hear me loud and clear.
Okay.
The reason I read the Constitution at the start of the meeting was because I did hope to be able to ask some potentially difficult questions, which I hope the leader and his colleagues will take in the spirit in which they are given, which is in the spirit of our Constitution. Councillor Williams has pointed out that for the 22-23 budget, there was a zero rate increase on council tax for the residents, and that was used for political purposes just before an election. However, this document shows that for that year, we cut a further £150,000 from the budget from a department which was at that time crippled, and at this point in time, on the basis of what we've heard today and is in the report, could be classed as barely fit for purpose. So does the leader not reflect that perhaps a 1% increase to put nearly £900,000 back into this directorate on the baseline of the ongoing council tax that we bring in would have been a much more sensible decision to make, rather than a political one that was used in order to garner votes? Because I don't take any pleasure at all in reading this report or listening to the corporate director tell us the strains that she's under. And I do have a second question, if I'd be able to come back in one.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Chair.
So first of all, in terms of your use of the term political, bear in mind that is a subjective comment. There's no evidence to show that that was a political decision. The leaders already said it wasn't based on a political decision, and also that the discussion was wider than just one party in this council. So there was the subjective comments. I don't believe they have a place in this analysis, in this discussion about our Communities Directorate. You have made some valid points regarding your view on the condition of the directorate at the moment. I think it was a bit harsh, but nevertheless, I think you should focus your question on that issue instead of subjective comments about politics. So if you want to reframe the question and ask it again.
My comment was, Mr. Chair, can I just say that my question was no less or more political than your statement about 14 years of Conservative austerity. You gave a time frame when the Conservatives have been in power in Westminster and used that as austerity.
I didn't use the word Conservative, and I didn't use the word austerity. I just said since 2014, which is in the report, and 2010, which is also in the report. So can you move on, please, and ask the question,
Mr. Chair,
without those comments?
Can I please ask the leader if he feels that we could have raised council tax by 1% for the 2022-23 year and put £900,000 back into the baseline of the Communities Directorate?
Okay, leader.
So no, I think we made the right decision at the time. It was supported across the chamber. Of course, if Councillor Bledsoe is making a proposal that he wants a higher council tax increase next year to put more into the Communities Directorate, I'm sure that's something we'll be interested to hear in the chamber, if that is the proposal for a higher council tax increase from Councillor Bledsoe and his colleagues. It certainly wasn't a proposal that was made at the time by his group leader. It wasn't made by any of the other colleagues that he has in the chamber, and I think that's probably all I should say in response to that contribution. Thank you, Chair.
And the second part of your question then, Councillor Bledsoe? Or your second
Thank you,
question?
Mr. Chair. Yeah, thank you. And I did caveat it with I am asking difficult questions. I recognise that, and there will be differences of opinion. The one thing that stood out to me from the report is that perhaps we can't always do what we've always done, and we may need to look at things doing them differently.
Yeah.
Would the leader look at ways that we could perhaps look at investments that could directly generate revenues for this authority? Because I actually do agree with you that the pot that comes down from Westminster does diminish every year. I don't think we're going to see it grow in the reality of the near future, whoever forms the next government in Westminster. So can we please, as a council, look at ways that we can invest money that actually generates revenue that we could invest back into serving our residents? I've had the great privilege of being in southern Germany for the last couple of days, where the local council invested in a fleet of electric vehicles that they rent out to the residents. That generates revenue for the council, that's reinvested back into the area. I would love to see our council do that for a multitude of reasons, least of which to generate revenues that we can protect this community's directorate. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So before I invite the leader and possibly section 151 also to answer that, just to remind Councillor Bett, so that he and I have sat in various committee meetings where we've looked at the council's investment strategy, and you know, he's raised it on a number of occasions, asking for assurances that you know, we are being safe in terms of our investment strategy. And I think every time we've had some really good, confident replies, which has made me feel confident, and I think it's made him feel confident as well that we're on the right track. So yeah, so leader.
Thanks, Chair. So I'm sure that Councillor Bletts was delighted with the development at Cosy Corner, where we are about to let a number of commercial units that will be rented for rental income, that will be income for this council over the long term, but will also provide premises for new businesses in Porthcawl. And we're very pleased that we'll be welcoming the First Minister to see that investment this week. And of course, we were creative and proactive enough to ensure that we secured additional investment for that new facility. I'm sure the Section 151 officer can confirm that the rules have changed quite significantly in terms of the ability to borrow money purely for commercial investment reasons, and in fact that is now no longer allowed under rules made at a UK level by the UK government, by the Treasury, and that does obviously limit the scope for investment purely for commercial return. However, we will always look at opportunities, just as we've maximised those opportunities in Cosy Corner to secure income streams, where the primary purpose is to regenerate and create jobs, because that is allowed under the current regime and set of regulations in which we work. I don't know the set of regulations that are in place out in Germany, but I'm sure that Councillor Bletts are going to advise on that one. I do think there's a different framework there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Leader. Caris.
Thank you, Chair. I think the leader's covered a lot of it, really, in that, just to state, as I've said when I've brought our Treasury management policies through Cabinet and through Council in recent months, that the rules have changed and we cannot any longer borrow just for commercial activities. And I think just to strengthen that, the thing is, if we do, we will not be able to borrow at all from the Public Works Loan Board for any purpose if we use the money in that way. And the issue for Bridgend with regards to that is that we do use our borrowing to help fund, for instance, our school building programme and other key developments that we've got. Therefore, we can't put that borrowing at risk by by investing in issues for purely commercial gain. Obviously, what we can invest in is things which may have an impact on our revenue account. So we might be able to invest in more efficient vehicles, which I think you've already mentioned, Councillor Bledsoe. And if we're using those to run our services, and then they have a consequential benefit in our revenue account. But we can't borrow just for commercial gain. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. That's quite clear. I'm going to go to Councillor Martin Williams as the last question before we take a comfort break, because we've been going now for an hour and 20 minutes. So, Councillor Martin Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's clear, and I think I knew that anyway, that we can't borrow purely for commercial gain because of high-profile cases across the River Severn. But we could still use our reserves for commercial benefit, couldn't we? So the sort of thing Councillor Bledsoe mentioned there would be no restriction on using reserves for that if it was considered to be prudent. That's just a point of clarification, really. Or is it borrowing and use of reserves, or is it purely borrowing?
Carlos again, is it? Carlos again?
I'm happy to answer that. I'm happy. No, it's
Carlos is going to defer to the leader, so yeah, go on. Go on.
I wouldn't step on the second and third officer's doors. I'll leave it on.
We can use our reserves. The only thing I would remind you is there's an opportunity cost of using our reserves as well. Over £43 million of our current reserves are earmarked to fund capital schemes that are already in the capital programme, so we would have to rethink our capital programme. And also some of them are being used as well to support other schemes. So there would be an opportunity cost if we were to do that.
Okay, thank you for that, guys. So as I said, I'd like to take a comfort break now. Oh, Janine, you've got something to say, yeah?
Yeah.
Last comment then, yeah?
Oh, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to offer a little bit more narrative, really, to some of the schemes we've done that might, a good example. So we use Revenue Invest to Save, done lots of Invest to Save schemes to invest to save money on our revenue. All of the street lighting, 16,000 light bulbs we've replaced around the borough, making significant revenue savings as a result of the cost of those. We've done refit schemes in our primary schools. 19 primary schools have put energy efficient measures in, new boilers, they've put in insulation, solar panels, etc. And the energy they're saving pays off for the refit over a 7-year period. So that's an invest to save, make the buildings more energy efficient. We're looking at things like solar array, looking at solar panels, solar farms then, to see whether we can power some of our buildings or depots, using ultra-low emission vehicles and vehicle charging. We've done quite a lot of that. We are always looking for more opportunities, absolutely, and we will do as many as we can. So yes, it's definitely about investing to save against the revenue budget. And I just wanted to give you those live examples, Chair, of some things that we've done. I would love to be able to buy a fleet of electric cars and lease them out. I haven't got the capital to do that. But we are putting charging infrastructure in, Chair. You'll see in most areas around the borough now, we've got the electric chargers in public car parks. We've got them in leisure centres, community centres. And actually, I need to say that the most used electric chargers in the whole of the CCR are in Puthcall in our borough. They've had the most use. So it's good to know that in Bridgend we are having a transition to ULEV for our residents. So it's really good to help that. But I'll stop there, Chair.
Thank you, Janine. Yeah, so as I say, if we can take a break now, we'll be back at 25 to the hour. Councillor Jenkins, you'll be the first question we ask. Okay, thanks very much.